Yesterday, at exactly 1:15 p.m., the world shifted. A stunning revelation from Kyiv rippled across global media and sent shockwaves through Moscow and Beijing alike. Ukrainian intelligence announced that it had uncovered a secret oil network, an elaborate $2.4 billion operation allegedly financed by China and designed to feed Russia's war economy in silence. It wasn't just the price tag that stunned analysts. It was what it symbolized: a hidden alliance, a breach in the wall of neutrality Beijing has so carefully constructed, and perhaps the clearest sign yet that the world's geopolitical balance is being rewritten behind closed doors. For months, Ukrainian cyber units and field agents have been following the faint scent of something unusual: energy shipments moving through Central Asia under obscure company names. On paper, it all looked routine: trade in lubricants, synthetic additives, and industrial fuel. But the deeper Kyiv's agents dug, the more they realized the truth. Behind this facade lay a shadow supply line reaching directly into the heart of Russia's war machine. At the core of the operation were two Chinese giants: China Petroleum Engineering Corporation and Sino Energy Logistics, both with deep ties to Beijing's state energy apparatus. Through a web of subsidiaries in Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and Kyrgyzstan, they created what they called dual-use corridors. Officially, these routes serve civilian industries in Siberia. In reality, they move crude oil and refined fuel to Russian military refineries in Khabarovsk and Novosibirsk, sites that feed tanks, aircraft, and armored divisions on Ukraine's eastern and southern fronts. What made this possible was deception on a global scale. Ukrainian cyber operatives reportedly gained access to an unsecured Mongolian server belonging to a logistics firm. Inside were encrypted trade manifests, customs declarations, and payment ledgers, all leading back to Chinese state-linked entities. It was a digital gold mine. Cross-referenced with satellite imagery and customs records, the evidence painted a damning picture: tanker convoys crossing the Zabaikalsk, Manzhuli border shipments labeled as industrial lubricants, but in truth carrying oil worth hundreds of millions. To mask their trail, the conspirators moved payments through intermediaries in Dubai, Astana, and Hong Kong, using dirhams and yuan to bypass the SWIFT system. Smaller regional banks in Central Asia served as the final laundering stations, burying the paper trail beneath layers of opaque financial transactions. The amount, $2.4 billion, translates into roughly 20 million barrels of crude, enough to power Russia's battlefield logistics for months. Enough to explain how Moscow has kept its war engine running despite Western sanctions and oil price caps. For Ukraine's intelligence services, the discovery wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. Once seen as a nation fighting defensively, Kyiv had now evolved into a formidable cyber and intelligence power capable of unmasking global networks that even Western agencies had only suspected. But the geopolitical tremor extended far beyond Ukraine. Inside the Kremlin, the mood reportedly turned from denial to panic. Emergency meetings were convened within Russia's Ministry of Energy and the FSB. The revelation couldn't have come at a worse time. Winter looms, fuel consumption surges, and Moscow's military supply chains are already stretched thin. Beijing's response was measured but telling. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs denied any wrongdoing, insisting that all trade operations comply with international law. Yet nowhere in its statement did Beijing directly refute Ukraine's specific claims. The silence spoke louder than denial. Meanwhile, in Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky praised his intelligence services, calling the exposure a victory of truth over secrecy. In his nightly address, he reminded the world, information is power, and power can change the course of war. Western allies moved swiftly. The European Union began reviewing the evidence. The United States Treasury Department requested full access to the dossier, hinting at possible new sanctions targeting Chinese intermediaries. Officials under the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, known as CAATSA, suggested that loopholes enabling such covert funding would soon be closed. For analysts, this revelation changes everything. It connects long-suspected dots between China's neutral economic partnership and Russia's capacity to survive under siege. It also exposes a new dimension of modern warfare, where energy is as decisive as ammunition and logistics are as strategic as missiles. In this light, Beijing's alleged involvement may not be driven solely by profit. It's strategic. By quietly fueling Russia's war effort, China ensures that Moscow remains a viable counterweight to the West, a geopolitical buffer that distracts NATO and the United States while Beijing consolidates power in the Indo-Pacific. The move fits neatly into Xi Jinping's vision of a multipolar world order, one not dominated by Western influence. Yet the risk for Beijing is immense. If Western nations conclude that China has crossed the line from economic partner to material supporter, global repercussions could follow: sanctions, trade freezes, and diplomatic isolation. For an economy already showing signs of strain, that's a dangerous gamble. The fallout from Ukraine's revelation has already begun to reshape the diplomatic landscape. In Europe, political leaders are calling for stricter oversight of trade with China. In Washington, the discovery is reigniting debate over secondary sanctions and enforcement of energy trade restrictions. Even neutral nations are being forced to reconsider their stance. For Moscow, the exposure cuts deeper than just logistics. It damages the illusion of control, the idea that Russia can sustain its war indefinitely through hidden lifelines. Each leak, each revelation, chips away at that narrative, revealing a state increasingly dependent on secret foreign support to keep its war economy alive. Inside Russia, whispers are growing louder. Sources close to the energy sector report rising fear of supply disruptions. As temperatures drop, shortages could hit not only the battlefield but also civilian regions. A winter crisis looms, and for the Kremlin, every lost gallon of fuel now carries strategic consequences. And yet, despite the chaos, one thing is certain: this is not the end of the story. If Ukraine could uncover a $2.4 billion lifeline stretching across continents, what other networks remain hidden? What other nations might be quietly funding the fires of this war? As Kiev's intelligence continues to dig deeper, the balance of secrecy and exposure shifts once again. Somewhere between the servers of Mongolia and the oil fields of Siberia, the next revelation is already waiting to surface. And when it does, the question will no longer be whether China and Russia are collaborating in the shadows, but how far they're willing to go to keep the truth buried. Yesterday, at exactly 1:15 p.m., the world was hit by a revelation that few saw coming. From the heart of Kiev came a statement so powerful, so disruptive, that it sent shockwaves from Washington to Beijing. Ukrainian intelligence claimed to have uncovered a $2.4 billion covert oil route, allegedly financed by China, built to keep Russia's war machine alive under the radar of Western sanctions. It wasn't just another leak. It was an earthquake in the global order. For years, China has portrayed itself as neutral, calling for peace, urging diplomacy, playing the careful mediator. But now, if the intelligence is true, that facade may have cracked wide open. Behind the speeches and the statements lay something far more dangerous: a secret network of tankers, shell companies, and offshore transactions, all flowing into the veins of Russia's war economy. The birth of a shadow network. The story began months ago when analysts inside Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Directorate, known as the HUR, noticed something strange. Energy shipments crossing Central Asia didn't add up. Routes that should have been simple were looping through multiple borders. Manifests that listed lubricants and synthetic additives were showing fuel volumes far beyond industrial need. Then came the breakthrough. A logistics contractor in Mongolia accidentally left the company server unsecured. Ukrainian cyber units seized the opportunity, and what they found inside would rewrite everything. Encrypted trade manifests, customs declarations, wire transfers between shadow firms in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Dubai, and Hong Kong. The deeper analysts dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't trade. It was a covert energy lifeline. At the heart of it were two familiar names: China Petroleum Engineering Corporation, and Sino Energy Logistics, both partially owned by the Chinese state. Through a maze of subsidiaries, they disguised a network of dual-use infrastructure projects, publicly declared as civilian energy corridors, but secretly designed to move crude oil and refined fuels into Russia. Satellite imagery later confirmed the evidence. Convoys of tanker trucks crossing the Zabaikalsk, Manzhouli border under false documentation. The cargo, officially industrial lubricants, was in fact military-grade oil, bound for refineries in Khabarovsk, Novosibirsk, and Omsk, the same refineries that keep Russian tanks rolling and jets flying over Ukraine. Money without a name. To keep the operation invisible, the masterminds bypassed traditional financial systems entirely. Payments were processed in yuan and dirhams, routed through small regional banks in Central Asia, and converted into legitimate-looking trade credits. The SWIFT network, the global heartbeat of modern finance, was carefully avoided. The network's complexity stunned Western analysts. Every link was designed to fragment the trail, from Beijing's ministries to Kazakh front companies, from Mongolian freight brokers to Emirati intermediaries. Together, they built a structure that not only hid its Chinese origins, but also blurred accountability at every level. $2.4 billion. The scale alone is staggering. That's enough to buy nearly 20 million barrels of crude oil, a volume sufficient to fuel Russia's military for months. It also explains something many in the West have quietly questioned. How has Moscow survived 2 years of relentless sanctions? A silent war beneath the surface. As Ukrainian intelligence pieced the puzzle together, they realized this wasn't just about oil. It was about power. Energy is the bloodstream of war. Without it, supply lines collapse, jets stay grounded, and tanks become iron coffins. The operation represented something far bigger, a hidden alliance, one that blurred the line between diplomacy and warfare.